about, you transformed into leadership at a fairly young age. I mean, that in itself presents, unique challenges. So maybe just talk about some of the lessons that you learned when managing teams, because you're now head of Pace Property Group, and we're going to get to that, and how it's been revamped and different company and that kind of stuff. So maybe just talk about some of the challenges or some of the experiences that you've learned in leadership.
Yeah. Look, I think you're 100% correct. As a youngster, I had to learn to work with much older people in the construction field. I worked with indunas, I worked with foremen, I worked with engineers and so forth. And a lot of the time, in fact, most of the time, I had to give instructions to them. And as a youngster, based on our culture and how we were brought up, you had to learn that someone who's older than you, you need to respect them. In fact, there were even basics such as you don't look at somebody in the eye. As I grew up later, those things had to change. I remember Mr. Butler saying to me, listen, look at me in the eye. And I was like, oh my word, what now? But I think, some of the basics were that respect still goes a long way. There is a way that you can talk to somebody, ensure that they take your instruction, but without being disrespectful to them. In fact, one of the things that became very clear to me is that, we used to start work at 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:45 we had to be there. Basically, between 6:45 and 7 o'clock, you need to explain what needs to happen on site that particular day. Now, a lot of the time in the industry, you're simply told, go and do this. And one of the things that we had to start changing quite early was to say, why are we doing this? Give people the bigger picture. Let them understand, where are we actually going? Instead of simply using people as tools and simply say, you do this between this time and this time. If they have a bigger picture, you actually find that, the outcome is a lot better than what you would have initially envisaged. So those are some of the basics that one learned quite early on in life. And we've continued on that basis, the sort of leadership style that I have within PACE, in other areas that I'm involved in, those are just some of the basics that filter through.
Okay, great. I want to talk a little bit about the construction mafia, because it's quite a big thing at the moment.
Construction mafia, yes.
So all I'm really trying to, I think I just want to get your opinion.
Yeah.
On why has this kind of transpired, and most importantly, what can we do about it? Because I understand that it's now become a significant problem for developers like yourself, for the economy, for employment, for everything else, because the construction industry is such an important employer of people in the industry.
We talk about construction mafia. The construction mafia, as I say, you get the bad, and you get the guys who will simply come cap in hand and say, we just want opportunities. Construction mafia, at the end of the day, as soon as guys take out guns, and as soon as guys threaten, as soon as guys impose and say it will be, then of course that becomes criminal elements. And that's where the police then need to start coming in. But the whole concept that if you operate in a particular community, that you have to make opportunities available to that community. That there's nothing wrong with that. It is in our laws. It is allowed, especially with public sector. And besides, if we have to be responsible citizens, if you look at the amount of poverty that we have, the inequality that we have, the unemployment that we have, as a responsible contractor or as a responsible developer, you have to take those things into account and ensure that they are then built into the project very early on.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more about Pace Property Group.
Okay.
Because Pace Property Group has been around for a while. I know you bought the company. So tell us, how the company has sort of evolved over the number of years, and let's talk about where your focus is now, because and how you're going to contribute to the South African property market and our challenging economy, which we're hoping it's turning, and we're seeing something turn. So your thoughts around the future of Pace Property Group and your vision.
So one of the groups that I was previously part of basically acquired a majority stake in Pace a number of years ago. And then after a while, basically we decided to turn Pace into an internally focused business as opposed to an externally focused. It was very much an externally focused business where it was out there doing business for external clients. However, we then turned it into mainly an internally focused business where it was really looking after our own assets. Since I have basically joined Pace on a full-time basis, I have now basically changed that. We've decided to basically be externally focused once again. However, we've repositioned the business. As you know, Pace was one of the top brokers in the country when it comes to property investments. We now do less broking. We do more facilities management, for example. We do more development management, where we actually manage developments on behalf of developers. So if you have a development and you want that to be taken through the entire process, we can basically do that on your behalf. We do construction project management, and we do property asset management, where we can basically get involved in terms of developing a property portfolio for you as an investor. We can put the strategies together for you. We can actually go through the process of acquiring the properties on your behalf. We get involved in terms of the management of the properties. We can get involved in terms of disposal once you decide to dispose or refurbish, and so the entire basically life cycle. We can get involved in that. In fact, we're working with some investors where in some instances we become minority shareholders in the structures that we create. But the bottom line is that we have the asset management expertise, and we are able to then hold the investor's hand throughout the life cycle of an asset.
Great. So the industry is pretty competitive. How are you going to differentiate yourself? And also, at the end of the day, it's about solutions orientation. How are you going to make Pace that's going to stand out from the rest in your mind? I mean, we've already talked about, for example, which you've got extensive knowledge on, the construction mafia, and I can see you playing a role from what you've told us in that particular area. But maybe just talk about from Pace's perspective, how you differentiate yourself and how you, from a solution orientated sort of service.
Yeah, so I think we are entrepreneurs first and foremost, and as entrepreneurs, what it means is that when we encounter challenges, we always try and find solutions. So it can happen very often that people say, oh wow, this challenge is insurmountable and that's it, I give up. But what we tend to do is we will always find a way. We will find another way. If we've got to go through this massive wall, we will find another way to go around it, over it, whatever the case is. And we do that for our clients as well. So that's probably the first thing. I think the second thing is that, as you know, Pace used to be very much a private sector driven sort of entity where it would provide services largely to the private sector. What we've tried to do this time around is to be a lot more balanced. So to provide services to the public sector as well as to the private sector. That's important because in order to solve the problems of South Africa, we cannot only be focused on solving private sector problems. We need to have a bigger picture and see that we've got serious challenges in this country, and issues around property and issues around the built environment and issues around infrastructure development are areas where we can actually make a huge dent. So Pace actually wants to play a much bigger role in that sort of area. So we actually want to make a difference and start seeing differences when it comes to unemployment, inequality, and so forth.
So we're talking public-private partnerships.
Absolutely.
Public and private part, which is an initiative that the government is essentially calling out on.
Pretty much, because we need each other. We absolutely need each other. Government can't do it on their own. Private sector can't do it on their own. However, if we start to see eye to eye, and we start to look at what the challenges are and start to tackle those challenges together, then I think, you know, there's a lot that can be achieved.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some of your projects and your future projects, how you're going ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, because we obviously working in different sort of areas, but on the development side, for example, we are busy with a project for a provincial government up in Pretoria, which is it's just under 400 million rand in size. We're managing that project from inception all the way up to completion. We're currently at what they call stage 3. We're just about to go into stage 4. Basically, PACE is acting as principal agent on that project. We're quite excited. We're hoping to break ground by around October next year, because we still have a bit of town planning and the like to go through. But yeah, that's probably one of our largest projects that we're currently managing. We're also busy with another project which is currently at construction in the Johannesburg CBD. We probably will be reaching practical completion on that project around April next year. We've got another project in Soweto, which is currently at construction. Unfortunately, there was an issue there with the contractor, so we've had to change one, but we're in the process of doing that. On the property investment side, we've just started with the acquisition process with a group of investors that we've assembled in Cape Town. We've started that process, and we're busy. We're in the building phase. That is something that I'm quite excited about, because I think that if you look at the property sector and you look at what has happened, especially when you look at transformation, you can see that we've actually regressed. There used to be companies like Reposes that were listed on the stock exchange, largely black-owned, listed, and they, you know, we used to look up to those sort of organizations. If we are to make a dent in property in this country, it's important that we see people that are similar owning offices, owning shopping centers, owning big resi schemes and so forth, and developing those. And right now there's a bit of a gap. So one of the things that we are aiming to do as PACE is to assemble a group of like-minded investors that want to basically make some difference. It's going to take a while, because we're doing it from scratch. We're doing it and we're building up from there. And we're looking for other investors that can join us in this sort of journey. So basically, PACE then acts as an entity that is basically managing those assets. We look for the opportunities, we assess them, we present them, we package them, and then basically manage them throughout the life cycle of an asset. We also have done some facilities management work. For example, in Cape Town here, we had an international client that we're doing facilities management for. Unfortunately, that contract has come to an end now. We're also doing facilities management for that client in Johannesburg. And then we've also been doing some facilities management work for a public sector client in the Durban area. Yeah. So those are just some of the highlights. I think what you can see right now is that we're in an environment where interest rates are on the way down. We've just had the very first cycle where interest rates have started coming down. In my view, they're a little bit on the conservative side. Because if you look at what has happened in the US, the percentage at which they have dropped is a lot greater. But I used to work at the Reserve Bank. You have to be conservative as a central banker. But be that as it may, interest rates are on the way down. If the interest rates are on the way down, what it means for property investors is that a little bit more cash flow. So less money going to the bank in terms of interest payments, and more money staying in. And if more money stays in, it means more distributions, it means more money being reinvested in the property sector. So we are going to see a bit of an improvement in the markets, and that's from the listed sector to those who are individual investors. There will definitely be an improvement. Over the years, I think, as I indicated earlier, one of the things that we have to see in the industry, especially the South African property industry, is that we need to see a lot more transformation. And in my view, you have entities such as the big pension funds. I won't mention their names, but the big pension funds, in my view, have a big role to play here in ensuring that that transformation basically takes place. Now, we want to make sure that companies like ourselves, as PACE, are there to provide the solutions and say to the guys, well, guys, this is how we can go forward. Present the opportunities and say, here are the opportunities, and present the solutions. This is how we can basically take you there. So there has to be quite a bit of engagement that takes place, and that's why organizations such as South African Property Owners Association, such as SIBIP, such as the REIT Association, there has to be engagements with those organizations on how we can basically take the property industry forward. I recently attended the REIT Association conference, and when one looks around, you can see that there's still a long way to go in terms of ensuring that the property sector is transformed. Unfortunately, that just shows you what happens right through. Whether it's ownership at the apartments, those kind of things, that is how it is. We have to transform. We really have to transform in order to make sure that we take the country forward. So that's one of the areas that I think PACE can play a role in.
So just on that, and it is a little bit of a controversial in terms of BEE, and the question is it working? Because I think a lot of the companies, it's almost like a big fear where they have to give a majority sort of ownership. And I agree in terms of the principle of transformation. I don't think there's an issue around that. I think it's really how transformation is done.
Yeah.
And I think that's where BEE has been a little bit abused, I would say, in the past, where companies become fearful. What are your thoughts around BEE and how it could be implemented, and does it have a role to play from a transformation perspective?
Okay, so I'll answer that in two ways. Firstly, to explain that I'm not necessarily suggesting that there need to be handouts. That's not what we are talking about. We're talking about black investors coming on board, perhaps at the lowest level, and then getting some assistance from those who are able to. If you take big pension funds, those big pension funds are the big investors on the listed sector, not just property, in the listed sector in South Africa as a whole, in the JSE. They are the biggest investors. So whether you are black or white, the fact that you are ultimately able to list your company on the stock exchange, it's because those companies have enabled that to happen. So they can empower whether you are black or white. Those organizations have been able to basically take those processes forward. But what I'm saying when it comes to empowerment here, again, there shouldn't be any fear. In fact, some of the guys that are the best entrepreneurs in South Africa, whether they are in Stellenbosch or Pretoria or in Sandhurst, they see BEE sometimes as an opportunity. They'll see it as an opportunity. So in my view, it's simply a mindset. It's simply a mindset that needs to be shifted. So you need to see it as, how can we grow the cake, as opposed to take the cake as it is and slice it up and say, I'm giving it to you. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying the cake is this big. Let's grow it to this. And as it grows, let's all benefit. And let's all benefit as a country, in fact, because the challenges of this country are just so huge. And we're not going to solve the problems of this country simply by having very few benefiting from the country so far. That's why we've got the kind of challenges that we have, because we need this to trickle down to the rest of the population. And it's not a black and white thing. It's simply a challenge of the country. Our challenges are just too big. We will not be able to solve the problems of South Africa actually purely based on the size of our economy. So we actually have to grow the size of our economy. Grow the size of our economy, and we will start to see these challenges simply being tackled one by one. Unemployment rate at 34% is crazy. You know, the unemployment rate for youth being at over 50%, it's madness. It's something that's going to blow up very, very soon. So unless we see it from that perspective and say, how do we as South Africans come together, and how do we then grow this cake? And as we grow it, we make sure that everybody benefits and not just a few.
Wonderful. I think nicely put there. So, Siya, just in closing, just your final sort of thoughts, your parting shots in general, about the market, about pace.
Yeah.
You seem pretty excited, and it's wonderful chatting to somebody as experienced as you are, because you've got quite a colourful track record with very big companies. I mean, the Reserve Bank, and I know you also with various big other brands, Crowley Project Investments besides, and your upbringing. So certainly I see you definitely playing a role going forward. So just your final thoughts, your parting shots to the audience in terms of where you'd like to take your group and your contribution overall to South Africa, because I think you've got a role to play.
Yeah. So the things that I'm really passionate about, it's infrastructure development on the one hand, and it's property on the other hand. So if you look at on the infrastructure development side, that has to be driven by government, and we've been talking a lot about rolling out this infrastructure, and the whole country has got a benefit. That just hasn't happened. So what we are trying to do is to see how people like ourselves can get in there and basically assist government. That's why part of my time I also use assisting organizations that are linked to the public sector, and I do spend a bit of time doing that, and hopefully I'll be doing more of that, because what we want to see is that being realized. So there's that aspect. But of course, with PACE as a company that provides solutions, we would be very happy to assist in making sure that these projects, these massive projects, are ultimately delivered. And that's how we've repositioned the company as well. And then on the property side, the disparities when it comes to property ownership and the like are huge, and we want to be able to try and address some of that. And that's why we put investors together, and we try and start small and basically build up. But at the end of the day, property is about ensuring that you get the returns that you're looking for. So we also want to use our expertise, our experience in making sure that investors get the kind of returns that they need from the property that they own. And we want to provide solutions in that regard.